So let's get started. My name is Alex Miller. I'm the social media manager and marketing manager at TreePeople. This is Learn at Home. This is a program we started during the pandemic. And since then, it has grown into a robust community of people interested in learning about environmental topics, ranging from mushrooms to DIY projects at home to the LA River to dissecting the report from the UN Climate Committee. So it's been really fantastic having these programs. And before we really begin, I would like to do a land acknowledgement. We acknowledge that the land TreePeople owns, manages, and conserves is on the ancestral lands of the Tongva, Chumash, and Tataviam people, the original stewards of this land. We honor their elders, both past and present, for the continued connection and to the protection of one of the most beautiful and diverse landscapes in the world. I just would like to say that this is all made possible by generous donors. We have a wildfire challenge match, so any donation that you make currently will be doubled. And without further ado, I would like to introduce Nanci Torres-Poblano, and she is our waste, Nanci, you can, she's our waste youth leadership.
It's a long one. It's waste management youth leadership coordinator. So yeah.
Fantastic. So I'm going to have you take over from here, and please feel free to put any questions, comments in the chat, and we will begin.
Awesome. Thank you. Let me just again say thank you for joining us today. I'm really excited to be able to share some of these things with you all. And like Alex mentioned, I'm the Waste Management Youth Leadership Coordinator here at TreePeople. And what that entails is, anything related to waste management. Those are kind of like my areas of expertise. And so I'm able to kind of share that with a lot of educators, but also students through a program called Generation Earth. And if you are an educator on this call and would like to bring some of this messaging to your school, to your fellow educators, feel free to reach out to us at TreePeople. So just to get started, defining, what are sustainable resolutions, and the definition of sustainability is, as defined by the UN, is meeting the needs of the present without compromising the ability of future generations to meet their own needs. And a resolution is just kind of like finding an act that you want to determine upon, or an action that you want to continuously do throughout the year. And so since we're kind of speaking about the new year, these are things that you want to harness in your life for 2022. And so one of the first things that I really like to ask people, or to kind of get people thinking about, how do we even start to think about resolutions, sustainable resolutions, more specifically. And so I ask people to think about the current situation that they're in, right? So what is it that they're looking to make a change upon? Is it to reduce the amount of plastic that they use, or to reduce the amount of waste that they produce, or generally maybe thinking about consuming less? And so after kind of determining the type of behavior or action that you want to take, thinking about what are some of the steps that you would take to be able to achieve that goal. And so with that, also thinking about, are these new steps going to require me to purchase something new, or can I utilize things that I already have so I don't have to go ahead and purchase something new? Just really utilizing what I have to the best of my ability to be able to carry on those sustainable resolutions. And so one really important note that I also wanted to mention is that there is no prescribed method of achieving sustainability or being sustainable, right? So a lot of the times I feel like social media plays a big role on how we kind of think about being more environmentally friendly, having these really cute tote bags and these really cute cutlery. But a lot of the times we don't need to fall into that, right? We can just use a fork and a spoon from home and carry our own mugs instead of having to buy this really cool new object. And so that in itself is sustainable. And I also wanted to kind of bring us back to the idea of the 3 Rs. I specifically also like to mention 4 Rs because I think there is this new shift that's been happening where a lot of people are becoming a lot more conscientious of their consumption habits or just their habits in general. And so some of the biggest R that I like to focus on is having people rethink. And that entails, like thinking about, for example, if I'm going to go to an outing, what steps can I take beforehand so that I don't have to rely on these single-use items in the future or when I'm already there. So really planning ahead and thinking about my activity in that way. And then, kind of falling into talking about reduction, reusing, and ultimately recycling. I focus specifically or try to have the students and teachers that I work with, or just anyone in general, thinking about these first 3 Rs, because we really want recycling to be like the last ultimate kind of action that we go into. And so thinking about sustainability, I have divided it into 3 different areas. So the first is at home. And, home is where we kind of, after a long day, we just come home, we're able to relax here. But this is also where we do a lot of different activities. And one of those biggest activities I feel that we all participate in is consumption of food. And so if we all like to cook at home, ultimately at the end of the preparation process, we have all of these food scraps that we have. And so some of the things to think about when we have all of these food scraps is how to utilize them again. So we can make them we can use them to make vegetable broth. We can also make pastries. So if you use a lot of carrots, for example, you can chop them up really nicely and bake something new with them. You can compost these scraps. And the new trend that I've been seeing is people taking these scraps and like putting in like olive oil and sea salt and putting them in their oven and just making these like really crispy chips that they can use as an appetizer. And also regrowing the vegetables, right? We can put these in water and a lot of them are able to kind of give us that second round of growth to be able to consume again. And thinking about, composting and food scraps, I did want to take a moment to mention some of the benefits that come with keeping our food scraps out of the landfill. So when food scraps or anything that's organic gets taken into the landfill, there are anaerobic bacteria that are present there that break down all of these organic materials. And a byproduct that gets produced from that is methane. And so if we don't send these organic things into the landfill in the first place, we can prevent methane from being produced at the landfill. And unfortunately, in California, landfills are the 3rd largest source of methane. And methane is 84 times more potent as a greenhouse gas than carbon dioxide. So it's more effective at trapping heat. And that, as we all know, is related to climate change. And so sometimes when people think about, climate change and what are some of the things that I can do, because it can become like a very daunting topic, I talk about organics and just the simple act of diverting them from the landfill. That's kind of one of the biggest actions that we can take to help with climate change. The other things that we have at home are clothing. And, I myself am guilty sometimes of thinking about, like I really want this like really fashionable new item that's coming out. But then I get thinking like, do I want it or do I need it? Because if I need it, I can probably make without it. If I want it, I can probably make without it. But if I need it, then it's something that is going to help me for my survival or my well-being, right? And so I have found that at least in our home, we have a lot of like old t-shirts from like clubs that we were a part of, or just pieces of clothing that don't really fit us anymore. And so one of the ways that I like to reuse clothing is to make new things from it. So I've gotten into making like tote bags, for example, and I will go ahead and walk through the steps of how to make a tote bag. And there's no sewing machine required, which is pretty awesome because this makes it accessible to a lot more people who don't, want to get like a needle and a thread to sew some things together. We can also cut these things into smaller pieces. so that we can use them as cleaning cloths to be able to wipe our tables down, or, have them in the car, just if you spill anything in your car, that can kind of be used to be able to clean up the mess. And another of the biggest ways is also kind of using t-shirts to make a quilt. So you can cut out like the really, really awesome design that's on the t-shirt, and you can put it with other pieces as well. You can start making kind of like this amazing quilt, and you can give that as a gift to people. And so I did want to mention, like I mentioned previously, sometimes, we're human. We want to be able to follow trends, or we want to be able to have like something really cool that's, fashionable at the moment. But that unfortunately has also led to this big consequence of having fast fashion. So fast fashion is when we have textiles being produced at a really, really high rate because trends are changing so quickly. So we don't have like a turnaround rate between, when someone gets it and how long they have it and then they dispose of it. The amount of time that people have it now gets shorter and shorter as these like trends start to just like come up all of the time. So being conscientious about all of the resources that go into making just one t-shirt is really important. And so, like I mentioned, I love to make tote bags now, and there are only two materials that you need to be able to make a tote bag. The first is a pair of scissors, and the second is a t-shirt. And so all you have to do is cut the sleeves and along the neckline to be able to remove those pieces. And then you flip your shirt inside out, you make 1-inch cuts at the bottom that are like slits, and then you tie those slits together to be able to have this bottom defined after making all those knots. And the more knots that you make, the better, because you're reinforcing the bottom of the bag. And then once you're done, you have this really cool new awesome bag that you made. And you can use this to be able to, go grocery shopping, or you can even use it to like give a gift. Or if you constantly carry a lot of things in your car like I do, you can just use these to keep yourself organized. And like I said, this is pretty amazing that we only need two types of materials, which are scissors and a t-shirt. I myself love to have jars at my house, but I'm also at a point where I have maybe too many. And I've started to think about, what are some of the different ways that I can utilize these jars so that I don't have to end up, having to throw them in the recycling bin or tossing them, or, not using them to the best of my ability. And so I've started to use them as places to store things. I like to make a lot of like food at home, and with that comes a lot of salsa. So I like to use these to store salsas. I also like to use them to put, for example, if someone really loves popcorn in my friend group and their birthday is coming up, I put a lot of popcorn kernels in it. I decorate the outside and I tie a really nice bow on it. And that's kind of like a gift to be able to give to them. They can also be used to store other things like your smoothies or your juices. And recently I have been doing a lot of plant propagation. So I use a lot of mine, which you probably can't see anymore, but to be able to just keep my plant cuttings in here, as well as using them to hold like my color pencils or my pens, just to keep me organized as well. And Alex actually mentioned with me that there are some places where you can take your jars back and they might be able to give you a discount. So it's worthwhile asking the places where you shop if they have that kind of program. The other area that I will be sharing some things about is thinking about sustainability at school. And I think that one of the biggest things that we can encourage our kids, or, our nephews, nieces to do is to bring their own lunch, because we have more of a say as to the kinds of materials that we pack in our lunch bags. So we are able to minimize the amount of plastic. We're also able to minimize the amount of overall packaging that comes in our lunch. And we're able to just, be more environmentally friendly in that aspect. Another of the ways is bringing reusable water bottles. There are some campuses that are starting to install the refillable stations, which is pretty nice because students can just fill up their bottle after they're done they have emptied their bottle. And so they don't have to rely on like carrying like 3 bottles, for example. They can just use the same one over and over. The other biggest things that I like to encourage students to do is to conduct a waste audit. And that basically entails going to your school and maybe starting off with like your own classroom and looking into your waste bin, emptying that out and categorizing everything that's in there. So all the plastics, if you have plastic, paper, maybe something that's a question mark if you're not really sure what is in that material, and really seeing, what type of trash is being created. And from that, you can kind of determine as a class what sorts of actions can you all take to minimize that type of trash being created. So if it's a lot of paper, like what can we do to be able to minimize the amount of paper? Maybe encourage using both sides of the paper if you're writing something, or if you have something that's printed, you can use the back as a scratch sheet paper instead of using like a blank piece of paper. And hopefully, doing this at your classroom, you can kind of expand that into your school to be able to encourage a little bit of a different behavior. And, one of the other things that we can do is also create awareness on our campus, not only with our peers, but also everyone that makes who is a part of that community. So talking to your teachers and counselors, maybe even your principal, to be able to support you with these types of awareness projects. And lastly, we are going to be taking a look at sustainability at work, some of the things that we can do in our offices or at home offices now, when thinking about, what kinds of actions we can take to be more sustainable. So one of the first things is to think about minimizing the amount of printing that we do. I think that we have a big opportunity here now that, some of us may or may not be working from home. We are able to rely more on like our tablets, maybe even our phones to kind of reference things instead of having to print like a piece of paper to be able to go back to it. But if you do end up printing things, you can always like reuse some of those pages, like a scratch sheet of paper, or maybe even make art from it. You can do it that way as well. One of the other things to also think about is maybe encouraging your employer to provide with a green bin. And the reason why I have this on here is because in the state of California, starting next year, so January 1st, 2022, we have a new mandate coming. And it has to do with organics and encouraging people to divert as many organic material as we can from going into the landfill. And so paper is one of those organic materials that we can put in our green bin so that we don't have to toss it into the landfill. And this is one action that you can have your employer think about, the benefits of having this green bin so that we are also able to help comply with this new regulation. And lastly, also thinking about possibly conducting a waste audit in your office space, whether it's like your own home or your office, if you are still working from an office space, thinking about, what are some of the types of trash that are being created and what kind of changes can we make, or who can we talk to possibly have these changes become implemented so we don't have as much waste being created. And those are some of the biggest actions that we can kind of conduct in an office space. I do want to ask if there are any questions about any of that. And yeah.
Thank you, Nanci. That was fantastic. I'm just gonna add a spotlight for myself. Yeah, I know. So everyone watching this will be seeing more and more coming out about organics, especially because of this mandate.
Yeah.
It's going to be a huge push. One additional thing you can do in your home is if you live in an apartment, if you can't compost yourself, that's totally fine. There are ways to manage that. I know people that use old Tupperware and put it in the freezer, or you can use one of these glass jars. Put it in the freezer, and so that you can have it for the stuff won't rot. And then and when it gets full, you transfer it to the green bin, you put in the compost, you can take it to LA Compost. They're a great resource for composting hubs as well. So they're also, if you want to put it right into a compost and instead of having the city do it, you can Google LA Compost, and they will provide hubs for you. So just because that is going to be a huge push, is to get our green bins in use. And so it's almost creating this third, you've got trash, recycling, and then compost, and or like organics. And that's going to be a huge push in this upcoming year. And it's just, it's going to be hopefully revolutionary, because we're hopefully going to be thinking about all that paper doesn't even need to go into recycling. Like, you can't recycle a pizza box, but when you're able to put meat, hopefully some people, like in parts of LA, you have to check with your hauler to see, there's a pilot program going on in certain parts of LA. I believe Echo Park is one of them. You can put meat in your green bin. So that means that instead of having to throw away your pizza box, that's paper that can go, like, because you can't recycle a pizza box because of the grease, it can go into the green bin. So it's going to be really exciting. Hopefully we're going to get these industrial composters. We'll try to figure out if they're actually green, but eventually all those organics are going to go back into the earth. So that's actually really exciting. Oh, we have a question. How does the 2022 law about organics relate to paper? I didn't understand that. So the 2022 mandate is basically saying we want to essentially eliminate the methane coming off of landfills. And so you've got the organic material. So paper is an organic material. If it goes into the landfill, it will produce methane, because the bacteria does not have enough oxygen. It goes into anaerobic respiration, decomposing it, produces methane as a byproduct, which is 80 times more potent as a greenhouse gas. So that paper can be recycled or put into the green bin if it's like a pizza box or anything like that. So, and that's kind of a personal choice as to where you'd like to see the paper go.
Yeah, and that came from the fact that in 2018 there was basically a statewide study that was done, which is something that I've mentioned, like the waste audit. And what they basically did is they went throughout the state, they went to different locations, and they noticed that a lot of the things that were being thrown out were paper, organic, anything that was really organic was the biggest category. And so they got to thinking about, we've had this law that was passed actually in 2006, and we're thinking about how can we kind of, get it implemented, because we have this timeline. And so they started to think about, of course, creating awareness about how it's related to climate change and also the methane productions. And so now we're asking people to think about, everything that we're basically tossing out. If it came from the earth, it shall return to the earth. And so paper is one of those items, right? And it's up to you whether or not you want to put it in a recycling bin or if you want to put it into a compost bin. But I would also encourage, like Alex said, talking to your waste hauler to see if there are any other specific rules to follow in terms of that, because, every waste hauler has kind of like their outline and their guidelines as to how to deal with certain things. But for the most part, I would definitely encourage you to put it into the compost bin.
And so the other question is, it doesn't make it inorganic, and organics is defined as things like essentially anything that's carbon based, but so anything that's not plastics or the fact that it has chemicals like applied to it or anything, the fact that we have pesticides on our fruits doesn't make them inorganic. So it's not organic in the terms of what we use for like labeling fruit or like labeling products. We're talking about organics, and we're talking about carbon-based life forms essentially, and products that are made from that. But you have to be very careful. Anything that is covered with any kind of plastic cannot go in the green bin. Please remove your stickers from your fruit. Those are not compostable.
Yeah.
It's wild that we haven't figured out how to make a compostable sticker for fruits. Because you'll talk to anyone. I've talked to people at like LA Compost, and they'll show me their pile of fruit stickers, because they just when they're sifting the dirt, they all come. It's mostly fruit stickers.
Yeah, that's very true.
Are
let's
there
see.
any other questions? Anything we can help you out with?
One thing I would like to add to that, what you just mentioned, is if you are in doubt, I would say throw it out, because a lot of the times we, throw something in the recycling bin saying, I think it's recyclable. And we're kind of like wish cycling, right? And so if there's any doubt at all, you can either, do a quick Google search to see if you find an answer, or you might be able to call your haulers and they can give you an answer. But if you can't find, you know, a direct answer, I would say just throw it out. It's better to not contaminate the materials that are already in the recycling or the compost bin.
What kind of education is being provided by the city about the green bins and these changes? I think that's going to be coming in the upcoming, like, truly that's all of our jobs right now, is to tell, like, I've told countless people that you can't recycle pizza boxes. Like, I am the recycling guru of my friend group. People like text me pictures, can I recycle this? And I'm like, you have to clean the plastic first. But for the green bin, it's really exciting. And so we're going to be telling all the students, and hopefully that's how change occurs, is when they go home, they're like, mom, dad, or whoever, like, guardian, we have to do this. So that's how we're going to be affecting change. We're also hopefully going to be doing public information campaigns. So we'll see.
Yeah. And I would like to add to that question that, like Alex said, it's up to us a lot of the times, but like I mentioned earlier, I, work with a lot of educators and a lot of students. And so we can also provide a lot of the education that comes with that, talking about the benefits of diverting organic waste and also composting with that as kind of like this really amazing thing that we can do when we divert organic or food scraps. And so, like Alex also mentioned, we do have these waste haulers who are now actually starting to make contact with their service areas. So you may be receiving flyers in the mail, you may be receiving phone calls about it, maybe emails, if that's the way that they communicate with you. But I also started to see that news stations are starting to talk about that, because this is something that we're all going to have to comply starting January 2022. Now, in terms of, getting green bins, now that you all have become aware of that, I would definitely encourage you, if you don't have a green bin and you know who your waste hauler is, contacting them and asking them, I'm interested in getting this green bin. What kind of steps do I have to follow to be able to get that for my household or to get that for my apartment complex? And they should be able to kind of walk you through those steps to be able to get these resources for yourself.
If you're LADWP, I believe you would contact LADWP because they kind of manage the accounts. So to answer that, are the LADWP regulations different from other municipalities? Every different hauler, it's all about the facilities of the locale. So it doesn't matter if you have plastics 1 through 5 recycle and you're putting them in the bin. If your area can only recycle plastics 1 and 2, which is most likely the case, I think in Los Angeles it is all of them because we're such a large area, but it depends. It's only what your area can handle. And so usually on top of your green bin, it might, or your trash or your recycling, it'll tell you what you can put in there. So in Burbank, this is a statewide initiative. So it's definitely going to be a push. I would say, and Nancy and I were talking about this, we're potentially planning on doing a how to contact your representative to make sure that all this stuff is happening, that that you can get a green bin, that you if no matter where you are, and kind of creating a guideline of how to. So that'll be coming in the next year.
Yeah, and one other thing I did want to add is that because this mandate is starting to happen in 2022, a lot of the cities, like for example, city of Burbank, as is mentioned here, they're starting to reach out to their haulers, the ones that they have created this contract with, to be able to ask them, hey, we want to comply with this new regulation. We want to be able to provide these services for our community members. what can we do to be able to have that happen? And so a lot of cities are already in that communication. And I would definitely encourage, either asking your waste hauler or your city specifically to ask them, how are we going to be able to comply with that? And they should be able to provide you with some guidelines as to how that's going to be happening. So, we don't have to wait till 2022, which is just right around the corner, to start asking these sort of questions. Yeah.
I actually just thought of two things for being sustainable at home. It's wrapping gifts. Using old paper bags, using what would normally be considered trash, or using a bag that, so in my family, they know to not wrap a gift for me, otherwise I'll get actually angry. My mom has essentially bags of that we reuse whenever someone gives us a bag, it's like it goes into the pile. I essentially use the same bag over and over. I've given it to them hundreds of times, so it's kind of a joke, but it's that, and then I put a fun ribbon on the top and cover something. If there's a scarf that I'm giving, I put that on top so they can see the scarf, but that's it. So it's thinking about reducing and rethinking all of this stuff. And if you've got and if you use a paper bag, you can decorate it yourself, and that so that's exciting.
Yeah.
And thing about, you can also rent it. This is for next year, I assume people already have their holiday trees, but you can rent a holiday tree, a living tree. When you're done, if you live in the city of LA and you're done with your tree, you can put it on the curb and the city will mulch it for you. They will haul it and take it away and mulch it. You can mulch it yourself if you want to. That's great. It's good mulch. So these are little things, but a living tree you can rent or buy a living tree and then plant it, keep it in a pot all year, make sure you water it, keep it in a shaded area. And then, yeah.
Yeah, that's actually something that I was reading about not too long ago. I forgot what specific city. I think it was in Europe, where there's this family who grows, all the Christmas trees, and instead of just cutting them, they pot them for people, and they, after the Christmas season is over, they can bring them back and have them be planted again, and so they can keep using the same tree over the lifetime, as many times as they want. And I did want to mention something here that I'm seeing from staff talking about this new legislation that is maybe passed or proposed about things that are usually marked as recyclable. So one of the biggest issues that a lot of people have, been bringing forward is that a lot of the materials that are coming in, like plastic, for example, they have this symbol that, that we're all aware of, the recycling symbol. But a lot of the times that's very misleading because a lot of those materials may not be recyclable. And so that goes along with the whole wish cycling, right? If we see that symbol, we automatically think we should put it in the blue bin. But because there are no markets, when everything gets taken to, be separated into their own category, let's say we have plastic number 7, a ton of plastic number 7. If we don't have a market for it at the end, we just have to toss that. Because unfortunately, recycling is a commodities market. And so if there is no person who wants this material to be able to use it to make new products, they're just going to toss it. And so right now there's a big push to kind of hold manufacturers accountable, but also there is this added piece of extended producer responsibility where, we should be thinking at the beginning of the pipeline instead of the end, where at the beginning of the pipeline, we have to talk to those manufacturers who are making these things in the first place. And that's where extended producer responsibility comes in. So that is something that I wanted to mention along with this. And let me see.
Oh, and I just want to mention for recycle, there's a reason recycle is at the bottom. Recycle is the last option. It's reduce. So it's reusing it's having a reusable water bottle instead of buying the plastic bottles that we will then recycle. Styrofoam is actually recyclable in Los Angeles. You have to clean it though. So there's that. Yeah, and of course I'm not buying ribbon, or I use twine, which is also compostable. So
Mhm.
yeah, so it's really rethinking at the top of, and of course there's no way to avoid plastic. I saw TikTok recently about something that Europeans were so surprised about Americans, and one of them was how much plastic we use. And so like I would love to see that change in the next 5 years. Would be amazing. And so it's really, and it's our job as educators to get the info out there. And so now you are all educators of this. Now you guys have the tools to go out and tell people. Uh, Correct. The balls of
Yeah.
styrofoam from packaging are not recyclable, which is why they have compostable ones. It's more expensive, and yes, it would. Yeah, there's no win right now, and there are options for packaging materials that are more environmentally friendly. You can use cardboard that's cut to it. So yeah, but it's tough. It's tough to we have to make conscious decisions all the time.
Yeah. Yeah, and along with that, one of the resolutions that I want to make for myself for the following year is using my voice a little bit more. So contacting these companies that I may be ordering things from, and then asking them, please don't put this in my box. Like, I don't know what to do with that at the end. So I don't want to have to, figure out what it is that I need to do with all of these little things that you send me. So if you can just avoid sending me that, and, doing that for other products as well, I started to notice that these like coffee aluminum cans had like this plastic rim on it, and I was like why why is that super necessary to have? And so just reaching out to them and being like, what is kind of like the purpose of this, because we just have to toss that at the end. And that's where we have two materials mixed together. Recycling facilities don't have the ability to just like take off that small piece to be able to use the rest of the aluminum can. They have to toss the whole thing, so it's not recyclable. We can't put that in the recycling bin. And that is, one of the behaviors that I want to be able to do moving forward, so that I can use my voice to contact these companies about that.
Great. Are there any other questions? I think we've covered a lot of ground. I think the organics is really going to be one of the biggest things next year, and
Yeah.
kind of trying to rework our brains to think about how to, like, oh my goodness, I can take that the onion stuff and then put that in a thing on my counter, and then twice a week I take that out to the green bin and I take that out. So it's creating these little, it's having to re-educate ourselves on just our daily lives, which is going to be tough, but
Yeah.
it's exciting though, because we are creating more capabilities in the industrial composting.
Yeah, and with that, there are waste haulers who have already said, if your green bin gets like really nasty after, however many months because of all the items that you're putting in there, they can replace it for you, or they can have it cleaned for you. So you can, reach out to them and have them kind of do that process for you, because I understand that that's one of the biggest kind of things that people bring up. Like, I don't want to have a really smelly bin, especially if there is like raccoons or, any other animals that might want to mess with my bin, because it just smells so weird. So that's what waste haulers are doing. They are doing like this free of charge like swap for the bin as an alternative. And there are other waste haulers that are like, it's okay to bag your stuff in a plastic bag so that you prevent all this stuff from going into the bin. But then they have to be the ones to like take it out of the bag. And a lot of the times their machinery, because there's so many bags going through the machines, they get caught and they have to turn all operations down to be able to pick all of these plastic bags out. So, it's kind of like a balance that we have to find to be able to move forward with this new organics mandate.
And some grocers, so if you, I mean, just recycling wise, if you have a bunch of plastic bags, say like grocery bags, you can bundle them up into one bag, tie it, and then like I know Ralph's will take them. Certain like grocers around Los Angeles will accept these bags and then
Mhm.
recycle them.
Yeah,
And
I'm so glad that you
about
mentioned
dog
that,
toys.
because one of the reasons why they did that is because they noticed that, for example, Target, they get a shipment of a whole bunch of things and then they go empty handed. So to kind of like utilize that empty container, they are now collecting those plastic bags. They do have to be pretty clean and dry. That we don't want material that's like wet because it can contaminate the rest of the things in the box. But there are a lot of grocers who are doing that, so that's something that I would look out for. I think that's a program that's starting to expand to encourage people to just like bring these bags back, so we can prevent them from going into the ocean, just from going into our environment overall.
I know there are more expensive doggy do bags that are compostable. The problem is what to do with the waste. We'd have to have they're definitely, I don't know if dog feces can be put in the compost, so I would be careful about that. So that is another issue of what to do with animal waste, which we will think about and get back to you. Oh, but yes, please. Yeah, you can reuse other types of bags for dog refuse. I've used a lot of words to describe. Yeah, and these suggestions are great, like dog toys. Thinking about even like giving bones versus like plasticky toys are going to be better. But this is great. These are great comments that are happening. So thank you.
Yeah. One other thing that I do want to mention about the new organics mandate is that along with having this diversion happen, there's also this big push to be able to recover food that is still edible, to be able to be used before it has to be thrown out or composted. And so there are companies like Vaughn's, for example, who, if they have food that is not bought and it's not able to be donated to be used, they will send it. They have like their own composting facility, so they send it back to their composting facility, and then they make like fertilizer or like soil amendment to be able to like be sold in their stores. So they've kind of created this self-fueling cycle that they prevent all these things from going into the landfill, and they also get to create some revenue after that. So they've been able to kind of utilize it that way.
And I will mention that which is a very sad statistic, that 30 to 40% of all food in the US is wasted. So, oh, one thing is you can always you can ask for coffee grounds for your, if you have a compost at home, like so say you go to Starbucks or Coffee Bean or any of the local things, you can ask them for their coffee grounds and they're gonna be like, here you go. They might look at you like you're crazy, but yeah, they work well and the worms seem to like them. Otherwise, if there's no other questions, I just want to say thank you everyone for joining us. It has been a wildly successful, we've been doing this for 2 years now, but do you have any more info on how the free-for-all produce picking worked during the pandemic when the workers couldn't be out there? I do not.
No.
Sorry. But yeah, so, and we just want to thank everyone. This talk will be recorded and put on our YouTube, and we will send out a follow-up email. If we can't get to it, it'll be in the new year because we're gonna take a well-deserved break. So thank you all so much for coming. Visit treepeople.org. We have so many resources. If you have a question about rain barrels, about how to collect water, to look at our water section under learn. We have stuff on composting. Just if you pretty much have a question over our past 50 years, we've pretty much covered it. So really, really great stuff on our website. So just feel free to explore that. And we just want to say have a happy new year and happy holidays and happy winter, and have a great end of the year, everyone. So we'll see you
Thank
next year.
you.